Millionaire returned to his office and won't believe what happens. At 11:43 p.m., Danny Monroe made a decision that would change two lives forever, though he didn't know it yet. The millionaire founder of Monroe Financial Group had built his fortune on preparation, on seeing 3 moves ahead, on never leaving anything to chance. So when he realized his laptop, containing tomorrow's crucial client presentations, was still locked in his desk drawer, he didn't hesitate. He turned his Mercedes around and headed back to the towering glass building that bore his name, back to the 22nd floor office where he'd spent countless late nights building his empire from nothing. The building should have been silent. Empty. Secured behind keycard access and night security protocols. Just him and the ambient hum of a sleeping corporation. But when the elevator doors opened, Danny heard something that didn't belong. Music. Soft and classical, drifting down the hallway like a whisper. He paused, head tilting. Security doing rounds? No, they didn't play music. His instincts, the same ones that had helped him identify undervalued companies and market opportunities for 15 years, told him something unexpected was happening. He moved toward the sound, his footsteps quiet against polished marble, the music growing clearer as he approached the glass-walled conference room. That's when he saw her. Elizabeth Chin. He knew her name only because it was printed on her employee badge, a night janitor he'd passed countless times without truly noticing. She wore faded blue coveralls, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that showed threads of gray despite her appearing to be only in her mid-30s. Her cleaning cart sat abandoned near the door. But she wasn't cleaning. She was creating. Danny stopped in the doorway, his breath catching in genuine awe. The conference room's massive whiteboard had been transformed into a canvas. A mural stretched across its entire surface, a vibrant cityscape at sunset, buildings rising toward a sky painted in breathtaking gradients of orange and purple. Windows glowed with warmth. And there in the foreground, small but perfectly rendered, stood a little girl looking up at the skyline with wide-eyed wonder, as if the entire city existed to show her what dreams looked like. It was gallery-quality work. Possibly better. Elizabeth balanced on a step stool, carefully adding highlights to clouds with expo markers, her movements precise and confident. A Bluetooth speaker on her cart played Vivaldi while she hummed along softly, completely absorbed in her art. For this moment, she wasn't a janitor in a corporate building. She was an artist, creating something beautiful in stolen time. Then she stepped back to examine her work and saw his reflection in the glass. The marker fell from her hand. She spun around, nearly toppling from the stool, her face draining of color. Mr. Monroe. I can explain. Danny remained still in the doorway, his eyes moving between her face and the extraordinary mural. When he spoke, his voice was softer than he expected. What is this? Elizabeth's face drained of what little color it had. Her hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the step stool for balance. I'm so sorry, Mr. Monroe. I know I shouldn't have. But Danny barely heard her. His eyes had returned to the mural, drinking in details he'd missed in that first stunned moment. The way she'd layered the markers to create depth in the sunset. Oranges bleeding into purples, then deep blues at the edges. The buildings weren't just geometric shapes. Each one had character, personality. Some leaned slightly as if weary from holding up the sky. Others stood proud, their windows arranged in patterns that suggested stories behind every pane of glass. The technique was sophisticated. She'd used the limitation of expo markers, their transparency, their tendency to streak, and turned it into an advantage, creating a dreamlike quality that made the city seem both real and imagined. Light seemed to emanate from within the windows she'd drawn, a trick of layering colors that shouldn't have been possible with office supplies. And that little girl in the foreground. Danny stepped closer, examining her. She couldn't have been more than 4 inches tall, but Elizabeth had captured something in her posture. The tilt of her head, the openness of her small hands, that conveyed pure wonder. The child wasn't looking at the buildings with fear or intimidation. She was looking at possibility. Mr. Monroe, please. Elizabeth's voice cracked. She climbed down from the step stool with unsteady movements, already reaching for the eraser sitting on the conference table. I'll clean it off right now. It was my break and the markers were just sitting there and I thought. She shook her head, cutting herself off. I wasn't thinking. Please don't fire me. I need this job. Wait. Danny held up a hand, still not looking at her. He moved along the length of the whiteboard, studying the mural from different angles. In the bottom right corner, nearly hidden among the cityscape's shadows, he noticed something else. Tiny figures walking the streets. People. She'd added pedestrians, each one rendered with just a few careful strokes, but each one distinct. Some carried briefcases. Others held hands. One appeared to be looking up at the sky, mirroring the little girl's wonder. The whole piece told a story. About dreams and reality existing in the same space. About a city that could crush you or lift you up depending on how you looked at it. Danny turned to face Elizabeth for the first time since entering the room. Really face her. She stood rigid beside her cleaning cart, the eraser clutched in her hand like a weapon or a shield, her dark eyes wide with fear. Her coveralls were worn thin at the knees, faded from countless washings. Her hands, he noticed them now, were stained with various colors of expo marker, rainbow evidence of her secret art. Who taught you to paint like this? His voice came out softer than he intended, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Elizabeth froze, the eraser hovering near the board. What? This isn't amateur work, Danny said, gesturing to the mural. This is professional. Gallery quality. Where did you learn to do this? Elizabeth's hand hovered over the whiteboard, the eraser pressed against the painted sky, ready to destroy hours of work in seconds. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, panic written across every line of her face. I went to art school, she said quietly, the words coming out like a confession. Parsons. Full scholarship. A lifetime ago. Danny's eyebrows rose slightly. Parsons School of Design. One of the most prestigious art schools in the country. Getting a full scholarship there meant you were exceptional, not just talented. He looked at the mural again with new understanding, seeing not just skill but formal training in every deliberate stroke. And now you're cleaning offices? The question hung in the air between them. Elizabeth flinched as if he'd struck her. She lowered her eyes, her shoulders curving inward in a posture of shame that made her seem smaller than she was. Life happened, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Danny waited. He'd learned years ago that silence was often the best tool for getting people to reveal the truth. In boardrooms, in negotiations, in moments like this, people filled silence with honesty they might otherwise keep hidden. Elizabeth set the eraser down slowly, her fingers releasing it with visible reluctance. She didn't look at him, just stared at her stained hands as words began spilling out. I was in my senior year. Top of my class. I had a thesis project planned, a series on urban isolation and connection. Professors said I had a real shot at gallery representation after graduation. A bitter smile ghosted across her lips. I believed them. I believed I was going to be someone. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself as if cold despite the building's controlled climate. Then I got pregnant. My boyfriend, she stopped, corrected herself. The father. He was another art student. When I told him, he said he wasn't ready to be a parent. Wasn't ready to give up his dreams for a baby. He transferred to a school in California 2 weeks later. I haven't heard from him since. Danny remained silent, but something tightened in his chest. He'd built his entire career on calculated decisions, on weighing options and choosing the path that maximized returns. But life, he was learning, didn't always offer clean choices. I tried to stay in school, Elizabeth continued, her voice growing stronger, as if speaking the truth aloud was giving her some kind of courage. I really did. I worked part-time at a coffee shop, took out loans, applied for every grant and assistance program I could find. But then Maya was born and... Her voice caught on the name. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Maya. My daughter. She's 8 now. Elizabeth's expression transformed when she spoke about her child, fear and shame giving way to something fiercer. She's everything. Smart, funny, curious about everything. She draws constantly just like I used to. Her kindergarten teacher said she had a real gift. You left school for her, Danny said. It wasn't a question. I had to. Daycare cost more than I made at the coffee shop. Student loans were piling up. I was surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night, trying to be a student and a mother and an employee all at once. She shook her head. Something had to give. So I dropped out. 3 months before graduation. 3 months before I would have had my degree. The weight of that sacrifice hung in the air. Danny thought about his own degree from NYU, paid for by loans and part-time work, yes, but without the complication of a child depending on him. Without having to choose between a future and survival. I moved back in with my mother, Elizabeth continued. Got a job as a receptionist. It wasn't art, but it paid the bills. Mom watched Maya while I worked. For a while it was okay. Not what I'd planned, but okay. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice had gone flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd told this part of the story so many times it had lost its ability to hurt. Then Maya got sick. She was 5. Started getting tired all the time, drinking tons of water, losing weight even though she was eating constantly. I took her to the doctor and they did blood work. Elizabeth's hands clenched into fists. Type 1 diabetes. Juvenile onset. Incurable. Danny felt his breath catch. He knew enough about type 1 diabetes to understand what that meant. Insulin injections multiple times a day, constant blood sugar monitoring, expensive medications, regular doctor visits, the threat of complications if not managed perfectly. The medical expenses were immediate and constant, Elizabeth said. Insulin, test strips, glucose monitors, emergency glucagon kits, endocrinologist appointments. Even with insurance, the copays were crushing us. My receptionist job didn't offer good health coverage. We were drowning. She looked up at Danny directly for the first time since beginning her story, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. Not just physical tiredness but the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting an uphill battle for years. My mother died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. I came home from work and found her on the kitchen floor. Maya was at school, thank God. She didn't have to see. Elizabeth's voice broke. She cleared her throat, forced herself to continue. I couldn't afford our apartment without Mom's social security checks. Had to move to a smaller place in Queens. 1 bedroom. Maya and I share it. Danny listened, his mind automatically calculating the financial pressures she was describing. Rent in Queens, even for a small apartment. Medications for a chronic condition. Food. Utilities. The basics of survival that most people took for granted. I needed a job with better insurance, Elizabeth said. Real coverage that would handle Maya's medications and doctor visits without copays that would bankrupt us. This position, night janitor at Monroe Financial, it came with premium health benefits. The kind that actually covers what she needs. She gestured around the gleaming office, at the expensive furniture and the wall of windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. So I took it. Night shift, 5 days a week. I work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. My neighbor, Mrs. Chin, no relation, just coincidence, she's elderly but kind. She stays at my apartment during my shifts, sleeps on the couch. Just in case Maya has a hypoglycemic episode in the night, someone's there who knows how to handle it. You work all night and take care of your daughter all day, Danny said slowly, pieces clicking into place. The gray in her hair despite her age. The exhaustion in her eyes. The worn coveralls and tired movements. I sleep when I can. 3-4 hours usually when Maya's at school. It's enough. Elizabeth's voice carried a defensive edge as if she'd had to justify this schedule before. Maya doesn't go without. She has her medications, regular checkups, a stable home. She's healthy. That's what matters. And the art? Danny asked, nodding toward the mural. Elizabeth's expression softened, became almost wistful. Sometimes during my break when I'm cleaning the executive floors, I see these white boards. These beautiful blank spaces. And I remember what it felt like to create something. To be more than just, she gestured at her coveralls. More than this. So you paint, Danny said. Just on whiteboards. Just things I can erase before anyone sees. Quick sketches during my 15-minute breaks. She looked at the mural with something like longing. Tonight I had a 30-minute break because I finished the 18th floor early. I thought I could create something bigger. Something that reminded me I used to be good at this. That I used to have dreams bigger than just surviving. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing back tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know it was stupid. I know I shouldn't have used company property for personal work. I know I broke the rules. For half an hour, I wanted to be an artist again instead of just a janitor who used to be an artist. Danny studied her, this woman who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter. Who worked all night cleaning his offices so her child could have insulin. Who created beauty in stolen moments during 15-minute breaks, only to erase it before anyone could see. Who'd been 3 months from a Parsons degree and gave it up without hesitation. The insurance through this job, Elizabeth said, her voice steadying with desperate determination. It's the only reason we're surviving. Maya's medications cost more than my rent. Without this job, without this insurance, I don't know what we'd do. Please, Mr. Monroe. I'll never paint during work hours again. I'll erase this right now. I'll stay late tonight and tomorrow to make up the time. Just please, her voice broke. Please don't fire me. Maya needs this insurance. She needs me to keep this job. The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth stood rigid, waiting for judgment, her hands trembling at her sides. The Bluetooth speaker on her cleaning cart had stopped playing music, the Vivaldi piece finished. The only sound was the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and the barely audible rhythm of the city beyond the glass walls. Danny looked at the mural one more time. At the little girl looking up at the city with wonder. At the buildings rising like dreams. At the possibility captured in expo marker strokes by a woman who cleaned floors to keep her daughter alive. "Maya," he said quietly. "The girl in the painting. That's your daughter." It wasn't a question, but Elizabeth nodded anyway. "That's how I imagine her future," she whispered. "Looking up at possibility instead of limitations. Seeing a world full of opportunity instead of obstacles." Her voice dropped even lower. "Everything I'm not showing her right now." Danny's expression remained unreadable, his dark eyes moving from the mural to Elizabeth and back again. The tension in the conference room stretched taut as a wire. Elizabeth held her breath, waiting for the sentence that would determine whether her daughter kept her insulin or whether they'd be thrown back into the nightmare of inadequate insurance and impossible choices. Finally, Danny spoke. "How long have you worked here, Elizabeth?" 2 years, Elizabeth answered, her voice barely steady. 2 years, 3 months. Night shift, 5 days a week. 11 to 7. I clean during Maya's sleep hours. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she stays at the apartment. Just in case. Danny nodded slowly, processing. "And you paint during your breaks? Is this a regular thing?" "Sometimes." Elizabeth's eyes dropped to her stained hands. "Just on whiteboards? Things I can erase before anyone sees. Small sketches mostly. A flower. A face. Nothing like this." She gestured at the mural with something between pride and shame. "Tonight I needed to create something bigger. Something that felt real." "Why?" Danny asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing whether honesty would cost her more than lies. Finally she spoke, her voice soft and raw. "It helps me remember who I used to be, I guess. Who I wanted to become." She looked at the mural, at the city she'd created. When you spend every night cleaning other people's offices, when you're just invisible, sometimes you forget you used to be someone who made things. Someone who had dreams that didn't revolve around insurance copays and insulin refills. The vulnerability in her words landed like a physical weight. Danny found his gaze drawn back to the small figure in the foreground, that little girl with her face turned skyward. "This girl," he said, pointing. "Tell me about her." Elizabeth's entire demeanor transformed. The fear and defensiveness melted away, replaced by something fierce and tender. "That's Maya. How I imagine her future. Looking up at possibility instead of limitations." Her voice softened with unmistakable maternal love. "I want her to see the world as a place full of opportunity, not obstacles. I want her to believe she can be anything. Even though she has diabetes. Even though we live in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Even though her mother cleans floors for a living." Elizabeth's eyes remained fixed on the painted figure. "Especially because of all that. She needs to know that circumstances don't define destiny." Something shifted in Danny's chest. A recognition, uncomfortable and profound. He'd built his entire fortune on a single principle, identifying undervalued assets. Companies the market overlooked. Properties other investors dismissed. Opportunities hidden in plain sight. He'd made millions, tens of millions, by seeing potential where others saw nothing. But standing here, looking at Elizabeth Chen and her extraordinary mural, he realized with sudden, startling clarity that he'd never applied that vision to people. Not like this. Not to the janitor who passed him in the hallway. Not to the security guard or the receptionist or any of the dozens of employees who kept his building running while remaining invisible to him. How many Elizabeth Chens worked in this building? How many people with talent and dreams and stories he'd never bothered to see? "You said you went to Parsons," Danny said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, as if examining a potential investment. "Full scholarship. Senior year. What happened?" "I got pregnant. The father left. I tried to balance school and motherhood, but..." Elizabeth's voice caught. "I couldn't afford both tuition and a baby, even with the scholarship. There were living expenses, medical costs, childcare. I had to choose. So I dropped out 3 months before graduation." 3 months, Danny repeated, the waste of it striking him like a blow. 3 months, Elizabeth confirmed, the words heavy with old grief. "I was so close. My thesis was approved. I had a plan for my final exhibition. And then it was just gone. All of it." Danny moved closer to the mural, examining it with the same intense scrutiny he'd apply to a financial report or market analysis. The layering technique Elizabeth had used to create depth. The way she'd manipulated the transparency of the markers to suggest light and shadow. The composition that drew the eye from the small figure upward through the buildings to the sky. The emotional resonance of the piece. Hope and wonder and possibility captured in something as temporary as whiteboard art. It was extraordinary. Not just good. Not just competent. Extraordinary. He thought about the galleries in Chelsea and Soho, the art he'd purchased for his penthouse apartment because his interior designer said it showed good taste. Pieces that cost tens of thousands of dollars. None of them had moved him the way this makeshift mural did. This is professional level work, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Gallery quality. Maybe better. The weight of wasted potential settled between them like something tangible. Here was a woman with exceptional talent, relegated to cleaning floors because life had demanded she choose between her dreams and her daughter's survival. And she'd chosen her daughter without hesitation, without bitterness, and somehow still found moments to create beauty in the spaces between. Danny turned to look at Elizabeth, really look at her, perhaps for the first time. "You're wasting your life here," he said. Her face went pale. "Mr. Monroe, please." "That's not a criticism," he interrupted gently. "It's an observation." "What would you do?" Danny asked slowly, his voice careful and measured, "if you could finish your degree?" Elizabeth's laugh was hollow, empty of hope. "That's a fantasy, Mr. Monroe. Humor me. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. I'm 36 years old with a child who needs round-the-clock care. Maya's medications cost more than my rent. Elizabeth shook her head. Even if I could afford tuition, which I can't, I don't have time. Between working nights and taking care of Maya during the day, I barely sleep 4 hours. When would I attend classes? Who would watch my daughter? Her voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd already examined every angle and found them all impossible. I missed my chance. That door closed 8 years ago. Danny turned to face her directly, his expression serious in a way that made Elizabeth's breath catch. "What if I told you that Monroe Financial has a corporate art program we're developing?" he said. "We're expanding, new offices opening across the East Coast. Boston, Philadelphia, D.C. We need an artist in residence to design installations, create pieces that reflect our company values, make our spaces feel less like offices and more like places where people want to work." Elizabeth stared at him, confusion and disbelief warring across her features. I don't understand what that has to do with—" "As of Monday," Danny interrupted, his tone formal, businesslike, "you are no longer on the janitorial staff." Elizabeth's face crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks as the words registered. "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "No, please, Mr. Monroe. Don't do this." "Mr. Monroe, please?" Her voice broke. She took a step toward him, hands clasped together as if in prayer. "I'll never paint here again. I swear. I'll erase this right now. I'll work double shifts to make up for the time. Please don't fire me. Maya needs the insurance. Without it, her insulin alone costs $800 a month. The test strips, the glucose monitor, the doctor visits." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please. I'm begging you. She needs." "You misunderstand," Danny said gently but firmly. Elizabeth froze, her breath catching mid-sob. Danny let the silence stretch for just a moment, watching understanding begin to dawn in her eyes. "You're being promoted." "That's not—" Elizabeth's voice failed her. "You can't be serious." "I built this company on one principle," Danny said, his tone taking on the certainty he used in boardrooms. "Invest in undervalued assets. Find potential where others see nothing. That's how I turned a $50,000 loan into what Monroe Financial is today." He gestured toward the mural, then back to her. "You're the most undervalued asset in this building, Elizabeth. And I don't make bad investments." Elizabeth shook her head, overwhelmed, struggling to process words that didn't make sense. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Danny's gaze shifted back to the mural, settling on that small painted figure, the little girl looking up at possibility. "Because I know what it's like to have talent that nobody sees." His voice softened, became more personal. "I was a kid from the Bronx, working class family. Everyone said I'd amount to nothing, guidance counselors, teachers, even my own father. Then someone took a chance on me. A senior partner at an investment firm gave me an internship I wasn't qualified for. No degree, no connections, just potential he saw when no one else bothered to look. He paused, his jaw tightening with emotion. Changed everything. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. And because that little girl deserves a mother who can show her that dreams don't have expiration dates. Elizabeth broke. Her hands flew to her face as tears flooded through her fingers. Her body shook with the weight of it all, relief, gratitude, disbelief, hope crashing over her like a wave. Sobs racked her shoulders as years of exhaustion, sacrifice, and deferred dreams finally found release. I don't know what to say, she managed between gasps. Say you'll start Monday. Elizabeth nodded frantically, unable to form words, emotion choking off her voice. Danny reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, holding it out to her with steady hands. Elizabeth took the card with trembling hands, gripping it like a lifeline. The paper felt impossibly light for something that carried so much weight. My assistant's contact information is on there, Danny explained, his voice returning to its business-like efficiency. Call her tomorrow, well, technically today now, after 9 a.m. She'll set everything up. HR paperwork, benefits enrollment, office assignment. We'll need to establish your workspace, discuss the scope of projects. Elizabeth nodded mutely, unable to trust her voice. Her eyes fixed on the embossed lettering. Daniel Monroe, founder and CEO, Monroe Financial Group. Below it, a direct phone line and email address. And Elizabeth? She looked up, tears still streaming down her face. Danny gestured to the whiteboard, to the cityscape she'd created during a stolen break. Don't erase this. I want it photographed for our website. Professional shots, proper lighting. His expression was firm, brooking no argument. Let people see what real talent looks like. Elizabeth tried to compose herself, wiping at her face with the worn sleeve of her coveralls. She wanted to thank him properly, to find words adequate to the moment, but everything that came to mind felt insufficient. Mr. Monroe, her voice broke. Thank you doesn't seem I can't. Monday, Danny said simply, saving her from having to find impossible words. 9 a.m. Don't be late. He turned toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing across the polished floor. Elizabeth stood frozen in the conference room, clutching his business card, watching him go. Thank you, she whispered to his retreating back. Thank you. Thank you. Danny didn't turn around. He simply raised one hand in acknowledgement, a small gesture that somehow conveyed understanding. The elevator doors opened, swallowed him, and closed with a quiet mechanical hiss. Elizabeth was alone. She sank slowly to the floor, her legs no longer able to support her. The business card lay in her lap next to the mural towering above her on the whiteboard. Her painting. Her future. Somehow, impossibly, they'd become the same thing. Her mind raced, thoughts tumbling over each other too fast to organize. Telling Maya. Calling Mrs. Chin. The new job. Returning to Parsons. Finishing her degree. Creating art again, not in stolen moments but as her work, her purpose, her life. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. Her first day at Parsons, 19 years old, walking through those doors with a portfolio under her arm and dreams so big they barely fit inside her chest. The smell of oil paint and turpentine. The high ceilings and north-facing windows of the studios. The feeling that she was exactly where she belonged. Another memory, darker. Holding newborn Maya in a hospital room, knowing she had to choose. Knowing the choice was already made. Signing the withdrawal forms with one hand while cradling her daughter with the other, trading one dream for a different kind of love. Elizabeth looked up at the mural, at the small figure of the girl gazing skyward. At Maya, imagined and hopeful. We're going to be okay, baby, she whispered to the painting. We're really going to be okay. Her hands still shaking, she pulled out her phone and photographed the mural from multiple angles, paranoid that somehow this would all disappear, that she'd wake up and find it had been a dream born of exhaustion and desperation. The photos saved. Proof. Evidence of the night her life changed. She stood slowly, collected her cleaning supplies with unsteady hands. The mop, the bucket, the spray bottles, tools of a trade she'd just been released from. She loaded them onto her cart mechanically, muscle memory carrying her through motions her mind couldn't quite focus on. One last look at the conference room. The glass walls, the expensive furniture, the whiteboard covered in her art. The space where a janitor had become something more. Elizabeth pushed her cart toward the elevator, Danny's business card tucked safely in her pocket, pressed against her heart. Danny stood alone in his corner office, hands deep in his pockets, tie loosened for the first time that day. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan's glittering skyline, A view he'd paid millions for but rarely stopped to appreciate. Tonight he couldn't look away. His mind replayed the encounter. The mural. Elizabeth's terrified face when she thought she was being fired. Her tears when she realized she wasn't. A woman creating beauty during her 15-minute break from scrubbing floors. A mother working all night so her diabetic daughter could have insulin. Wow. 8 years old, looking up at possibility instead of limitations. Danny had built his fortune on a single principle: recognize value where others see none. Undervalued companies. Overlooked opportunities. Assets the market had dismissed. He'd made tens of millions that way, turning Monroe Financial into one of Manhattan's premier investment firms. But tonight felt different. More personal. More meaningful than any deal he'd ever closed. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. He was 19, working as a courier for Steinberg and Associates, delivering documents between offices while teaching himself finance from library books during lunch breaks. One day, a senior partner named Harold Steinberg noticed him reading The Intelligent Investor on a bench in the lobby. "That's Graham's work," Harold had said. "You understand it?" "Trying to," Danny had answered honestly. Harold had studied him, really studied him the way Danny had studied Elizabeth tonight. Seeing something beneath the courier uniform. A week later, Harold offered him an internship. No college degree. No connections. No qualifications except curiosity and hunger. That internship became an analyst position. The analyst position became junior partner. Eventually, Danny left to start his own firm, and Harold had been his first investor, his first believer. Harold died 5 years ago. Heart attack at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports until the end. Danny had delivered the eulogy, but the words felt inadequate. How do you repay someone who changed your life? Tonight felt like partial repayment. Passing forward what had been given to him. Danny thought about Monroe Financial's culture. Aggressive, competitive, results-driven. They hired the best, worked them hard, rewarded performance. But somewhere along the way, had they lost sight of the human element? How many talented people walked these halls unseen, their potential wasted because no one bothered to look? The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. This wouldn't be a one-time gesture. He pulled out his phone, typed an email to his assistant with the subject line, "New Initiative, Priority. Rachel. Schedule a meeting with HR and legal for Monday morning. I want to establish a formal employee development and education support program. Full tuition coverage for employees and their dependents pursuing degrees. Scholarship fund for children of staff members. Priority given to those who demonstrate talent but lack opportunity. Also, I want a review of all hourly employees. Who are they? What are their backgrounds? What potential are we missing? This is non-negotiable. Budget is unlimited. DM." He hit send, then looked back at the Manhattan skyline. Each lit window represented someone working late, striving, struggling, dreaming. How many of them were like Elizabeth, talented, desperate, invisible? How many were one chance away from transforming their lives? The city looked different now. Not just buildings and wealth and power, but people. Stories. Potential waiting to be recognized. Danny picked up the forgotten laptop he'd come back for. The whole reason he'd been here tonight to witness something that would change him as much as it changed Elizabeth Chen. Sometimes, he thought, the best investments find you. Elizabeth entered her small Queens apartment as dawn broke over the city, exhausted but too wired to sleep. The one-bedroom space felt different somehow, smaller and bigger at the same time, as if the walls had shifted while she was gone. She moved quietly to the bedroom, where Maya slept in the twin bed they shared. Her daughter lay on her side, her insulin pump visible on the nightstand, its small screen glowing softly in the dim light. A worn stuffed rabbit was tucked under Maya's arm, its ear nearly loved off from years of comfort. Elizabeth sat carefully on the edge of the bed, watching her daughter breathe. The steady rise and fall of Maya's chest, the peaceful expression on her face, these were the things Elizabeth had sacrificed everything to preserve. She reached out, gently brushing hair from Maya's forehead, careful not to wake her. "Everything's going to change, sweetheart," Elizabeth whispered. "Mommy met someone tonight who saw something in me I thought was gone. I'm going to be an artist again. A real artist. I'm going back to school to finish my degree. And you're going to have everything you need. The best insurance, the best care. No more worrying about co-pays or whether we can afford your prescriptions." Her voice caught with emotion. "You're going to see Mommy be an artist again. Not just someone who dreams about it, but someone who actually does it. Someone who creates beautiful things and gets paid for it and doesn't have to choose between her dreams and you. Never between my dreams and you." Maya stirred slightly, a small smile crossing her sleeping face, as if somewhere in her dreams she'd heard and understood. Elizabeth pulled Danny's business card from her pocket, studying it in the glow of Maya's nightlight. The embossed letters seemed to shimmer. She placed it carefully on the nightstand beside the insulin pump, two talismans of survival, old and new. She looked at her hands in the dim light, calloused from years of cleaning chemicals, stained with expo marker colors, purple, orange, blue, evidence of tonight's creation. These hands had scrubbed floors and changed insulin pumps and held her daughter through countless frightening nights. These hands will create again, she whispered. Really create. Her gaze drifted to the wall beside the bed, where Maya's drawings were taped in a colorful collage. Crayon pictures of the two of them holding hands, always smiling. A house with a big sun overhead. Stick figures labeled Mommy and Me, surrounded by hearts. Elizabeth realized with a pang that Maya had only ever known her as exhausted, stressed, barely surviving. Her daughter had never seen what hope looked like when it was recognized and supported. Had never watched her mother pursue dreams instead of just endure reality. That was about to change. Elizabeth closed her eyes, allowing herself, finally, fully, to believe it was real. She sent a silent prayer to the universe, to her late mother, to anyone listening. Thank you. Thank you for this chance. I won't waste it. Across the East River in Manhattan, sunrise broke over the skyline in shades of gold and pink. Danny Monroe exited his building, heading toward an early breakfast meeting, the same route he'd walked 1,000 times. But this morning he paused at the coffee cart on the corner, a fixture he'd passed countless times without stopping, always too busy, always too focused on what was next. The vendor was an older man with kind eyes and hands weathered by years of early mornings. Danny noticed them now, really noticed, as the man poured coffee with practiced efficiency. "Good morning," Danny said, meeting his eyes. "Good morning, sir." The vendor smiled, surprised by the acknowledgement. Such a small connection. Such a simple moment. One Danny would have ignored yesterday. Everything looked different now. In Queens, Elizabeth kissed Maya's forehead one last time, then headed out to meet Danny's assistant, his business card clutched in her hand like a compass pointing toward a future she'd stopped believing in. In Manhattan, Danny entered the conference room where Elizabeth's mural had been professionally photographed overnight, the images already framed and mounted on the wall as inspiration for his team. The painted little girl still looked upward, her face full of wonder, no longer representing just one child but everyone whose potential waited to be seen. Everyone who needed someone to look past the surface and recognize what lay beneath. In a city of millions, two lives had changed course because one person chose to see what others overlooked. And both would never be the same. Thanks you for staying till the end. God bless, and please don't forget to subscribe because more interesting stories are up next.